Alright guys, this is going to be my review of James Luceno's Star Wars, Darth Plagueis. Now, right out the bat, guys, this is an amazing book. This is probably one of the best Star Wars novels I've ever written. Not written, I obviously didn't write this. Read, excuse me, yeah. This is one of the best Star Wars novels I've read, like, ever. And it's just an all-around, just stunning story of, you know, the dark side and the Sith, as well as it really makes you appreciate, it almost makes you appreciate Phantom Menace a bit more. And also, here's something I thought I'd never say, it makes midi-chlorians interesting. Yeah, I know, I was shocked too. So let me explain. So this is the story and the origin as well as the rise and fall of the Sith Lord who trained Sidious, the Emperor, more or less. Yeah, Emperor Palpatine, Darth Plagueis. This talks about how he rose from, you know, assassinating his master, Darth Tenebrous, who was actually a Bith. Now, if you don't know what a Bith is, to give you a clear idea, a Bith is basically, you remember in the cantina scene, you see the cantina band going do 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 do. Yeah, that's, just imagine that, one of those creatures as a Sith Lord. I bet you can't. I mean, I had to, like, physically, what's a Bith? Oh! Great, now I can't get that out of my head, that one of those guys from the it obviously wasn't one of the members of the Cantina band, it was one of their members of their race that became a Sith Lord. Yeah. But yeah, it talks about how Plagueis assassinated his master, as well as, you know, found Palpatine, convinced him to join the dark side, as well as, you know, several other things that went on throughout Phantom Menace, and obviously really got the ball going for the grand plan of the Sith on their revenge of on the Jedi. And yeah, it really does give you a lot to talk about with Palpatine, as well as Plagueis. Even though this is Plagueis' novel, you know, this does give you a lot of background on Palpatine, as well as, you know, it gives you a lot to really look into with Plagueis, and why he became the way he was, and why Sidious became the way he was. And it's a really good character piece, and it also really, again, it really makes you kind of like go, oh, this makes midichlorians fun. So this is what I like about James Luceno's work, is that we all know that the prequels, there's a lot of bad stuff in the prequels. And, you know, this, Labyrinth of Evil, and several other stuff he did in the prequel universe, he really tries to make sense of it. He really does try to make sense of what exactly had happened in the prequel universe. Obviously, with Labyrinth of Evil, in his version, Anakin was already kind of, you know, during the Clone Wars had been going on for years, and Anakin, not in Clone Wars the animated series, but in the novel, obviously Labyrinth of Evil came out a little more longer than the Clone Wars animated series. Luceno's book kind of talked about how Anakin had become, you know, this, you know, he's just kind of this war-weary, he just wants the war to end, he's sick of it, and he just wants to go home to Padme. Whereas it's not like in the animated series, where he's, you know, kind of used to it and almost a little cocky about it. But yeah, he really does put into perspective a lot of stuff, and also gave a lot of perspective, again, in Labyrinth of Evil, of how the Jedi kind of, you know, didn't really realize that the guy they've been talking to, their Chancellor, that they've been following through all the Clone Wars, was really the Sith Lord pulling the wool over everyone's eyes and orchestrating everything. It really does explain that. If you want a better review of it, if you want a good review of this, because it's been a while since I've read, you know, Labyrinth of Evil. Actually, no, I've never read. I was thinking of another book, sorry. But yeah, if you want a really good review of Labyrinth of Evil, go check out my friend Ivan Krolo's channel, because he gives a very in-depth review of Star Wars Labyrinth of Evil. And, yeah. So anyway, getting back to Plagueis. Plagueis in this story is a Mun. He is, if you don't know what a Mun is, the Muns were were members of the banking clan. They were the guys who funded the Separatists. And Plagueis, whose real name was Higo Damask, was one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful member of the banking clan, and he did a lot of funding for the Trade Federation, the Techno Union, and a lot of the separatist movements, as well as really got the gears going for, what was to be the Clone Wars through the separatist movement. The other interesting thing about this novel is that with Plagueis, you have a lot of this stuff going on. Keep in mind that Plagueis was actually alive during a majority of the events of Phantom Menace. Yeah, just keep that in mind, that it wasn't just, Sidious and Maul. It was not just Sidious and Maul. Sidious, at this time period, he was still the apprentice of Plagueis, but Plagueis kept himself hidden as Higo Damask. In fact, his original plan, when he was secretly helping Palpatine rise through the ranks to become, the Chancellor, his original idea was that he was going to become co-Chancellor, and that he was going to do a lot of funding on both ends of the Clone Wars, and really kind of put everything into a faster pace, and actually prolong the war longer than it had. However, Sidious didn't exactly see it that way. And that's kind of one thing you get. It's not really so much a takeaway now that I think about it, that, obviously this character is doomed to die. That's the whole point of this novel, is that it's no spoiler that at the end of this book, Plagueis dies. Because, again, we know how Plagueis died according to Sidious, but it's a lot different in the ending novel. But yeah, it's really no spoiler as to Plagueis dying, because then Sidious would be, it would be a lot more complicated, let's say that. But yeah, even, Sidious in Revenge of the Sith said that, his apprentice killed him. But it's not exactly how he dies. I don't want to spoil how he dies, but how he dies it's a little similar to how Palpatine described it, but at the same time, it's a little more different as well. It's a little more different and a little more violent for the fall of Plagueis. Now, with Plagueis, is that we all know from the story of Palpatine that his big thing was that he wanted to create and keep those he cared about from dying. Plagueis became very obsessed with the idea of the Force and, prolonging life and killing it. He almost becomes like a Mr. Sinister in a way in this novel. He almost becomes like a Mr. Sinister character, and spends a lot of his time just doing these horrible experiments on, all different forms of life throughout the entire novel. And it almost gets to the point where it's just it's very grotesque. That's the other thing, is that this book, not a lot of people die well in this novel. Not a lot of people die well throughout this story. And sometimes Plagueis gets a little too... he gets very into it with his experiments. He gets very much into his experimentations on his subjects, more or less. So, yeah, it's graphic for Star Wars. Like I said with Death Troopers, it's very graphic even for Star Wars. But with Plagueis, you really understand of how midichlorians, through the Darth Plagueis novel, you really get an understanding of how midichlorians work, and how even initially, Plagueis didn't like the idea of midichlorians. He just thought that they were just nothing more than little parasites and little reactors for, to channel the Force. That's what he's done through his discovery. But eventually, he learns how to manipulate them, as well as, keep his experiments going. I don't want to spoil how he stumbles onto that discovery and how he capitalizes it, but it is interesting. Meanwhile, you see throughout this novel that Plagueis gets more and more wrapped up in the idea of, prolonging his life and, growing his power, that he really much threatens the grand plan. He very much even though he swore,
obviously with the Sith, that the whole thing with the rule of two is that the Sith would eventually get their vengeance on the Jedi and just completely destroy them. But however, Plagueis' own intentions really were starting to get the better of him, and meanwhile we have Palpatine, who is, rising through the ranks. It's almost like it's almost like House of Cards, really, of how he rises to the position he has, as well, not just as, a senator of Naboo, but also how he eventually gets the power of, Chancellor. And it's, yeah, like I said, it's Palpatine almost comes off like a Frank Underwood type character in this story, but you do see that he and Plagueis are slowly split apart in their views, even though Plagueis believed that killing Tanibus also meant the end of the line of Bane. It meant the no more end of the rule of two. He wanted to create a new thing called the Sithari, which is very much like a Sith Empire, and that's why he allowed Maul to be Sidious's apprentice, because he wanted multiple Sith. However, that didn't exactly go well for him, and his idea of a new Sith Empire really came crashing down on him towards the end of this book. Again, it's very much of a rise and fall story. You do know, obviously you know how it ends going into it. Plagueis gets killed by Sidious, but I don't want to spoil how, and the journey and the road to that, to his death is really cool. I thought this was it's a dark novel. Luceno knows how to write villain characters, and I really want to read his Tarkin novel. As well as Labyrinth of Evil, and several others he's done. But yeah, he is really, and also his Rise of Darth Vader book. Yeah, that's the other one. But yeah, he is very, James Luceno is amazing at writing villains, especially with the Star Wars characters, and making, dumb stuff that was introduced, like the midichlorians, and making it interesting to read about. So all in all, if you're a Sith fan, if you're a fan of Palpatine like I am, or just a Star Wars fan in general, I highly recommend Darth Plagueis. Again, you know how it's going to turn out. Let's not beat around the bush. We all know how this story plays out towards the end. But really, it's a great adventure. It's a dark story of a rise and fall of a powerful Sith Lord. As Palpatine even said in Revenge of the Sith, the dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities that some would consider to be unnatural. And you see it no better than in here in the Darth Plagueis novel. So, yeah. Hope you all enjoyed this review. This was a lot of fun to do. And you guys tell me if you've read Darth Plagueis. What did you guys think of the novel? Did you guys like it? Did you guys hate it? But yeah, if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend the Star Wars Darth Plagueis. But anyway, once again, hope you all enjoyed this, and I will see you guys later.